Let's discuss the latest White House related headlines with our friend, the AP's Will Weiser. He covers the White House for the Associated Press. And Will, we have a lot to get to today. Let's start off in the Middle East, a live depiction of some of the marine traffic in the Strait of Hormuz, courtesy of our friends at Marine Traffic. President Trump says that an Iran deal is scheduled to get signed tomorrow and that the Strait of Hormuz would open immediately. So, Will, even if a deal does get signed tomorrow, that doesn't mean that the negotiations are over, correct?
Right, that's correct. First of all, Iran is not settled on the date for tomorrow. They say that electronic signing could be imminent, but not necessarily tomorrow, like the president says. And yes, any kind of signing, even if it were to come tomorrow, is just the first step. It would basically give both sides another 60 days to continue the ceasefire and to work on some of the more thorny issues, including the top issue is the enriched uranium, the sort of the dust left over after the U.S. bombed nuclear sites in Iran last summer. The question is, how would the U.S. go in, or would the U.S. work with other sort of partners to go in and collect that material? What would sort of happen to that material? Those are all important issues that they would basically give themselves more time to work on. But from the president's perspective, a key part of this would be the Strait of Hormuz, and the agreement, such as we understand, would basically allow the waterway to open, but also give Iran some rights to toll, to charge ships for services moving through there, which is something they wanted to do during the war. And, the U.S. and our allies said, that's basically violating international law, and you can't do that. So in theory, this would allow the strait to reopen, sort of calm oil markets, maybe calm the global economy, but also give some concessions to Iran. And the other big part of this is that Iran would also see some of the sanctions, international sanctions, rolled back, and have some more access to some of its assets that are frozen around the country. So we're not talking about cash necessarily, but sort of assets that was already controlled by Iran that they would then be allowed to use to buy things like medicine and food and other things. And so it would sort of effectively work like cash. Those are all things that would happen in the short term, and then the longer term would be working towards the sort of a more a larger solution on the nuclear, the leftover nuclear material, enriched uranium.
It's a memorandum of understanding. People are going to have to get used to that term. That's what we expect to get signed tomorrow. That means basically there's still more negotiating to go, and we'll be keeping a close eye tomorrow. And of course, we'll be watching marine traffic, and we'll be watching to see what the Pakistanis say. They're the ones that have been mediating all this. A lot going on in the world. Wanted to talk about the Middle East up top, but we also have this news out of Venezuela. Let's head to South America, where the U.S. killed the leader of the Tren de Aragua gang this week. That was according to President Trump. Venezuela's government also says that they participated in this operation. It's interesting, Will, and I know you wrote about this when we learned about the news. How would you characterize the White House's relationship with Venezuela? It's been just 5 months after Nicolas Maduro was captured.
Right. Well, that one thing that's been pretty consistent coming from President Trump and from the administration in general is they really feel like they have a very good relationship with the administration that replaced Maduro after the U.S. went in and took him out to face drug charges in the U.S. Delcy Rodriguez came from sort of the same background, same party. She was very leftist. She's the one who replaced Maduro. It wasn't a slam dunk that she was going to get along with the United States, right? She came from sort of a hardcore background that wouldn't necessarily get along great with a conservative administration in the U.S. or any U.S. administration. And yet, I think she took some important steps to say nice things right up front. She's been willing to, she and the government in Venezuela have been willing to work with the U.S. and international oil interests going in and sort of trying to set up make improvements of the infrastructure to the oil sector there. And so I think that Washington characterizes it as quite a positive relationship, and Venezuela has certainly said nothing that would oppose that. And this is some of the things that we've seen. That the Hegseth said, the defense secretary said that. This actually happened a few days ago, and they were able to sort of confirm it last night, and that it did happen on Venezuelan soil. But it's pretty amazing to think about a precision strike, taking out a leader of a gang. The president said it was the leader of the gang. The way that the U.S. had characterized it previously when he faced charges in the United States was that he was a key leader, maybe not the leader. But anyway, this is obviously somebody that the United States was targeting for a long time. Sort of wanted to either take out or to maybe bring to justice, and they were able to sort of do this with the cooperation, of another government on another continent is pretty remarkable, and I think does really speak to how far the relationship has come since Maduro was removed from power.
President Trump is going to be leaving the U.S. He's making a trip to France next week. The G7 going to be taking place. The president going to be, and I saw this reporting in the Associated Press saying that he and French President Emmanuel Macron will have dinner at the Palace of Versailles after the summit. So what are the chief items of diplomatic business that the president is going to have to tend to while he's in Europe, whether it's European leaders like Macron or whether it's other G7 leaders?
Well, I think Iran is going to be top of mind for a lot of folks. The White House has already said today that that the U.S. is going to work with our European allies to work to demine the Strait of Hormuz as part of the agreement if we get that far, the 60-day ceasefire. So that will be sort of top of mind. But trade and tariff issues will still continue to be a big issue. And whenever President Trump goes to these things, it's always you have previously either written online or spoken in person sort of badly about one leader or another and made insults. And so there's always a little bit of a sort of a delicate dance that's done where, when they see each other in person, the president can be quite charming and quite nice. And the European leader sort of has to, also forget maybe some of the things that were said about tariffs or other things in the past. There will be some of that as well. And obviously, I think that's sort of what we're seeing with Macron too. I mean, this, having dinner at Versailles and sort of the pageantry involved there is no accident. That's a sort of a charm offensive that a lot of foreign leaders have used with President Trump when he's visiting to try and sort of get on his good side and hope that there won't be repercussions in terms of tariffs or other the global issues potentially. I mean, the president has also talked about troop movement, right, and pulling troops out of Europe potentially. He's talked about threatening NATO. A lot of that is sort of more talk than we've seen exactly, and we don't know exactly how it will sort of play out. But these are all important sort of discussions, and I think the optics are very, very important too. And that will go for Macron, but it will go for a lot of European leaders as well. So in addition to sort of, talking about the war and very much like pressing issues, we'll also have a lot of sort of the more behind the scenes and maybe even overt efforts to sort of charm him that we'll also have to look at.
So let's bring things back stateside here. We've got this live vantage point of the Kennedy Center. The Kennedy Center has complied with an order to remove President Trump's name from the facade. I understand, Will, that there have been some looky-loos out at the building lately, although you can't really see the work that they're doing behind this curtain that they've placed in front of it. Where does the story go from here, Will? Is the story done?
I hesitate to say that any story is done with this administration and this president. Frankly, I mean, the White House is still appealing the judge's ruling. They changed the name once. They could change it again. I think that in terms of the dramatic moment when the letters came down and President Trump's name was taken off, that sort of happened overnight and into the wee hours in the morning. The cover there still adds some drama. We maybe won't see the cover there forever. It's hard to know with that. But there will be more, sort of legal twists and turns in the case. I think this is something that's been very frustrating for the president. He's tweeted about, he's written about it online on Truth Social. He's talked about it. And he's also sort of said that he wants to put this issue back to Congress, basically turn over the whole center back to Congress and question about whether or not he'll even do extensive renovations that he'd planned. Of course, there was already funding that was approved, for these improvements by Congress that's already there at the president's urging. So that's another thing we'll sort of have to watch very closely, that the board that runs the Kennedy Center is still, it's basically completely packed with Trump loyalists. And so they're going to sort of side with the president no matter what. They could find another way to maybe, do something else that challenges, that prompts another legal challenge. So I think maybe in terms of just for the next few days, we may not see any like dramatic removal of letters, but I don't think that the story is quite over quite yet.
We can't be on the air today without discussing the Octagon that's on the White House's South Lawn. We've been staring at it every day for the past couple weeks here. This is what it looks like up close. The UFC sent a video out kind of giving us a closer look at what the Octagon itself looks like and what this venue that they've built on the lawn looks like as well. And I know, Will, you wrote a story about this I know you have been in this exact area yourself. I loved the lead you wrote in the story that you made about this. It looks from afar more UFO than UFC. Please tell us about tonight's incredibly unique show on the White House lawn.
Well, I do think it's a little bit extraterrestrial, right? It reminded me of one of those like little claws that if you're in an arcade, it goes down and grabs stuffed animals and pulls it up. But it's big enough that it also looks a little bit like a spaceship. So I think the claw itself, that whole apparatus, especially if you're not it's sort of a UFC aficionado, this is sort of your first time encountering it, is quite something, as it was for me. And then seeing the arena that they built there with the temporary seating for more than 4,000 people, on the White House lawn with the Washington Monument in the distance. It's really something that I never thought I'd see at the White House. I think a lot of people didn't. But this is all part of celebrating the president's 80th birthday. He turns 80 tomorrow. He's a big UFC fan. He is really, really good friends with Dana White, who is the chief of UFC and sort of running this event and runs everything UFC related. And the two of them sort of conspired to bring this to the White House lawn. And the result is quite striking, especially when you think about all the things that are going on with Iran and all the the G7. He's going to go essentially straight from the fight. The fight's going to go till after midnight. So it's even scheduled till 12:30. So into the wee hours of the morning, he's going to go straight to Andrews Air Force Base and he's going to fly to France. And in the meantime, we could, either before or around that time, we could get a signing to potentially extend the ceasefire or move the Iran war closer to ending. So these are a lot of big issues, but it's not going to stop the sort of big party that the White House is having on the lawn for a president that likes to push boundaries.
So we were asking ourselves this in the newsroom yesterday. I don't know if you have any insight, but there was a judge ruling that was expected yesterday as to whether or not they were actually going to allow the fight to take place. What if that had come down yesterday and they said, no, you can't hold this event? Would it have actually put the brakes on this whole spectacle?
It's an excellent question. I think what it would have done is prompted a couple of emergency appeals, right, and stays to make sure that it went through. And I don't think that USC ever really took it seriously. The ruling allowed the fight to go forward, right? Didn't technically throw out the case. I mean, the case still exists, but it's not going to stop the fight. And I asked UFC for comment yesterday when it came down, and they didn't even bother because they never really saw this as a serious threat. But the government, the National Park Service, which runs the South Lawn, filed a quite extensive brief on this, where we learned some details about the claw and how much it cost and how how many people was going to seat and all that. And those are all details that came out in court because they were very seriously fighting this to make sure that it went through. The other question of this, of course, it's a TV event, right? And there would have been quite a few people unhappy at CBS Paramount if the fight were delayed, but that's ultimately not going to happen.
Right. Will Weiser with us. Good to see you, Will. And you can read his writing in the Associated Press. Have a good rest of your weekend.
Thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.